What's up, everybody? Welcome to Make Things Tiny. My name is Mick. So, you're buying a tiny house, and the main thing that you want to know is, can it withstand a storm? Well, this is the perfect video for you. Today, we are talking about tiny houses and safety, particularly around the weather and natural disasters. I'm excited for you guys to learn more about this. I know this is a really important topic for you all, and I'm excited to have Rich from NOAA on the channel to talk to you guys about all these things and answer these questions. So, if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe, and let's get into it. Let's talk about tiny house safety and the weather. All right, I am here today with Rich. Rich, thank you so much for being on the channel. Rich is the president of NOAA, which is a tiny house certification company based here in the US. I'm really excited for people to learn more about you and NOAA and certification in general. If you don't mind just talking a little bit about your background, what got you interested in tiny homes, that sort of thing.
Sure. Thanks for having me on. So I started. I basically how my career split in half. The first half was in the actual construction trades. I was a formerly licensed plumber, did masonry and that kind of thing. And then the next half is involved in inspections. I am a currently still a certified building official in Pennsylvania. I have zoning experience and plan review and all the fun attributes that go with it.
Awesome. That's great. That's cool. It's a really awesome background. I think that matches well with what you're doing now. So for those who are unfamiliar, those that are watching the channel, they have no clue what NOAA is. They don't even know what the acronym stands for. Can you talk a little bit about NOAA as an organization and then your work with them specifically?
Sure. So NOAA was started in 2015. They started as the actual original tiny house inspection company. And through the years, it has evolved into we're now an accredited third-party inspection agency, which is a big deal because there's a whole lot involved in becoming accredited. We have to have a lot of balances and checks and balances, and we actually get audited every 6 months to a year on everything, on employee performance, on employees standards, on inspections. They can pick any subject, and we have to go with it. But we also, in addition to inspecting tiny houses, we also inspect offsite construction, like similar to modular homes being built in a factory. And we also are working on inspections with local municipalities. So basically, if you go to your local municipality for a permit, we would be involved in that as well with inspections on a remote basis.
Okay. That's quite a bit. I think that's helpful for people to know because I think most people have probably heard of NOAA by now if they've been in the industry for a little bit, but I think it's helpful for people to know, a little bit more of what y'all do. I know that the certification process is probably pretty extensive, but if you don't mind just like in a nutshell talking about like what it means to have your home certified by NOAA and like some of the basic forms, like basic aspects of those requirements for people.
Sure. So as far as inspections go, we break it down into 5 stages, more or less, and then there's sub stages in those stages. So the first one would be the trailer inspection. So we just want to confirm that it actually meets the minimum standards for the trailers, and then from there it would be trailer insulation. So that's a little subset of the category, and then next would be a stage two. That's basically all your framing complete and your exterior sheathing in place. And then we're going to go around. We're going to make sure all the fasteners are in place. The trailer or the structure is actually bolted down properly to the trailer. And your nail pattern for the sheathing and wall sheathing and roof sheathing is more than adequate. And then we have what we call stage three, which is your plumbing and electric and HVAC. So we're looking at all of that, and we also want to see tests on the plumbing. So we're not just saying, all right, yeah, your plumbing looks good. We want to see your water lines under test pressure. We want to see your drain lines under test pressure. So it's new to a lot of people who have never
Mhm.
done it, and it could be a little overwhelming. So we're constantly sending out text with little tips and tricks on how to complete that, or something like that, or what they might need to get that done. Um, the fourth stage is insulation. So we want to confirm insulation in the walls, insulation in the ceiling, that you have the jambs around the doors and windows actually sealed up, which is surprisingly a pretty big miss on a lot of builds. And it's
Mhm.
not, it's completely accidental. But it happens. And then the fifth stage would be our final. So everything complete, said, operational, ready to either be shipped out to the client or be used by the client. So that would be
Okay.
our 5 stages there.
Awesome. I think that's super helpful for people to know because I think more than anything, the main thing is that people can get tiny houses anywhere, right? Like you can go to Craigslist and get a tiny house. You can go through tiny house listings, which is more established. You could go directly to a builder's website. But at the end of the day, I don't think everyone understands the difference between a home that is certified by NOAA, and one that's not. What would you say is the biggest risk someone's taking if they go on Craigslist or just go through like less formal channels and find a tiny home that isn't certified?
So it's kind of ironic because we were just having a talk about this internally. Like you could go to Amazon and purchase a tiny house. And the big issues are standards as far as structural. Will your house actually hold up? And what is in the walls and how is it attached? It gets really wild. Like another really big item is that product, or say like electrical, your HVAC, your mini split unit, you know was it built and designed to be used in the US, and can you get replacement parts for it? You know what I mean? Because I mean, it may work great, and then if it breaks down and you have a unit that was never designed to be used in the US, but somehow they finagled it to make it work, now you're stuck trying to figure that whole ball of wax out.
That is a huge one, right? I think that's the biggest thing is like people not really understanding what goes into building the tiny house. And when you don't know, you have no clue what to look for. But I think it's really helpful for that you're sort of like breaking down all these different things. Is there anything someone can look for that would help them, if they're going through a walkthrough and they buy a house, is there anything that they can look for where it could be like a potential red flag and they shouldn't go through with that purchase? Or is it like you really don't know because most of it is behind the walls?
Yeah, that's a double-edged sword there. But you are right. Like there are some key things. Like one of the biggest standouts that we run across is electrical panels. So if you
Okay.
have an electrical panel in the bathroom or in the kitchen, huge red flag.
Oh, wow.
They
Okay.
they can't be near water. They have to be so many feet away, and so that would be the first thing. The second would be, and it sounds silly to some people, but when you have a tiny house, you have to have your main egress, which is your front door, and
Hmm.
then in each sleeping area, whether it's a loft or on the first floor or wherever it may be, or both, you have to have a secondary egress, and that egress has to be 24 inches wide by 17 inches high minimum.
Hmm.
And there are so many units that are built without that egress. And the reason I say it sounds silly is because you're in a tiny house. It's the average tiny house is probably 28 feet long by
Hmm.
8 feet wide. And everybody thinks, oh, if they smell something, smell wood burning, or there's a fire, they're going to be able to get out. You can't say that.
Hmm.
You literally never know.
Yeah.
You can't
And
rely
it's a
on that
small
on
space
your own.
too, it's a really
Yeah,
small space, so, like, if there's a fire in one area, it's
it
basically
happens.
in the entire place.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That makes
Yeah,
sense.
and then speaking of fire, smoke
Mhm.
detectors.
Okay.
If I walk into a unit, or if I was looking for one and I walked into a unit and I didn't see a smoke detector, as annoying as they can get with the low batteries,
Mhm.
you that's a huge red flag.
Okay. Alright, that makes sense. That makes sense to me. I think I'm just thinking about some of the tiny houses I've seen either on people's websites or places like that, like, there's definitely been times where, like, there isn't even a window, like an egress, like another
Yeah.
one outside of the front door. So that is a huge one. I think that's important for people to think about, especially if they're buying tiny homes with lofts. You definitely shouldn't buy a tiny home with a loft if there's no if
Yeah.
there's no window there, and the one that's there is like really really tiny, like you
Yeah.
can't get out of it.
You can get
I've
your
seen
hand out and
those
say
before,
help.
where like it
Yeah.
looks cool aesthetically, but like in an emergency, you're not. Maybe your cat can get out, but that's about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Kudos to the cat, but yeah, you know.
Yeah. Well, I think okay, so this is a big topic that I'm seeing a lot lately. I'm coming across a lot on my channel in the comments and in general is the weather. So we've had more natural disasters and storms. We had everything that happened over in the southeastern part of the country more recently, North and South Carolina. What's on a lot of people's minds right now is how do you protect your tiny house in a storm? Is there anything that people can do to protect against unplanned natural disasters? And if so, what are some of the things that people should be thinking about or considering? And is that part of the certification process?
Um, so two answers on that.
Mhm.
One is for to stabilize the unit. So like if you're going to have a tiny house and you know it's going to be on a piece of land and the likelihood of moving it is pretty much slim to none, it is worth the effort and the money and the time to put put a basic frost proof, pier system in, even if it's one at each end. So you have 4 piers total, frost piers, and tie the unit down, tie it to it. It's not as hard as it sounds. It's just labor intensive. Um, but on the structural side or the natural disaster side of actually building the house, that's one area among many, but one area in particular where NOAA really, really shines above every other company out there. Um, we have standards that uh, you have to meet a minimum of, and I know this is lingo to some people. Some people get it, some people won't, but a minimum of 30 PSF for a roof live load. And so basically, if you have snow, that snow can, it, it, it it accumulates in an area and it can get so heavy. So that 30 PSF is pretty much a standard broad uh, range across the roof. And then the other standard that we have as part of our structural requirements is a minimum of 130-mile-an-hour wind gusts. So that all comes down to our stage 2 when we're looking at framing. We're looking at the nail pattern. We're making sure the fasteners are so far spaced apart, maximum on the walls, on the roof. Again, it comes down to the tie downs of the actual wall onto the chassis. And then simple things like headers, like window and door headers, like under the ANSI standard, on just the ANSI or NFPA standard, which is used by everybody else. Um, Unless you reach like a 6 foot, I believe it's a 6 foot opening. I'm sure somebody in the comments will correct me if I'm wrong, which is good. But no headers required under that standard. Whereas, we took the approach of, um, we're using the parts of the International Residential Building Code. And, so that has a header requirement for every opening that's on a load bearing wall. So, that ties into the whole 130-mile-an-hour wind zone and the 30 pounds roof load. It's a very big deal.
Okay, I didn't know that. So I didn't know there would like that you have a requirement on terms of the wind gusts that the house is able to withstand. I think that's really huge. I
Yeah.
know all of us have heard or seen horror stories of people's tiny houses like falling off their trailers or not being able to withstand even like a little bit of wind. So I think that that's something that should definitely give people peace of mind. Because there probably is, I'm just assuming there probably is a bit of an added cost to buying a home that's certified versus one that's not. But in my opinion, I would say that it's worth it because it's just going to save you time and it's going to save you money down the line. And then you don't have to replace your tiny house. That's kind of the risk you run if you buy one that hasn't been, um, you know, examined in any sort of way. And you definitely want to buy a house without some sort of inspection or anything like
Yeah.
that. So, but again, like you're saying, we can get tiny homes on Amazon now, and
Yeah.
people are very concerned about costs. So I think when you see something that's really inexpensive, in my mind, it should be a red flag.
Mhm.
Because most tiny homes don't cost 10K to build.
Yeah. 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 You can't even get the lumber for that much or yeah, it's interesting. And, to go back on the weather factor
Mhm.
with homes, I mean, we've actually had, clients that went through that, they weathered storms and, trees have fallen or large limbs. And they've walked away with, surface damage, like, facade, might have ruined their siding, might have ruined the corrugated metal roof, but the structure ended up fine, intact. We've had people that went through, mild hurricanes, and again, their tiny house, standing in place, and literally the next house over, um, which we won't get into, but it was obliterated. Um, so I mean, it works. It really truly works.
I think that's great for people to hear that, there are actual like case studies, it's not something that you're just saying, like, you have like proof, so to speak. You talked a little bit about building standards. I don't know if you've sort of like, if this is something that you all talk about at NOAA, but what do you think is the future of building standards within the industry?
So not to promote ourselves, but I will say that, I will give Noah an attaboy, so to speak, because, like we already employ standards that are well above, what, other companies are doing, and, so we're definitely ahead of the curve for several years. Um, but in in that light, like I'm not sure if anybody's familiar with, the like companies ASTM or the International Code Council,
Yeah.
um, but both of them are currently working on, um, more standardization of the tiny house industry as a whole. So there's a lot of movement, but again, a company like, a nonprofit, I should say, like International Code Council, um, their codes come out in a 3-year cycle.
Okay.
So, what we're talking about today or what they're talking about today will take, 3 years to the next code cycle to come out. So it's a process. It's going to be, for some maybe slow and painful, for others maybe too fast. I don't know.
Hmm.
But ASTM is actually, working on a foundation, um, standardization, and, our company CEO Robin Butler, he's working with them on that. So that should be turned around pretty quick. Not definitely not on a 3-year cycle. We're looking probably less than a year, if not months
Oh,
from
okay.
now. So the industry, I think as a whole, we'll definitely see some changes, for the better. I think, more safety aspects and things like that we have in place already.
Mhm.
So I think it'll, give people a little bit more peace of mind and on where to buy it or how to buy it. Not just, like an Amazon product. I see it on Amazon, it's good. They'll look for a certain, uh, identifier or whatever the industry standard, is at that time when we get there.
No, okay. That makes sense. No, I feel like yeah, I agree with you. Like, it can only be like a good thing to have more standards. So it's good to know that, there are, power that be talking about these things and trying to figure out the best ways to make the industry, more secure, and at least by the, in terms of the building standards and things like that. I always encourage people just to read everything that they can, learn as much information as possible. I think it would even be important for people to learn about the different standards for codes and things like that, just so that they have as much information as possible when they're asking questions,
Mhm.
so that they don't take everything at face value when they're shopping on Amazon, I guess, for tiny
Mhm.
homes or wherever they might be going. So if you know if someone were to reach out to you, or like there's people watching, right now, and they're like, okay, I want to do this. I definitely want to get a tiny house, but they literally don't have any idea, what the best options are to start that process. What would you
Mhm.
say are like the main things they should be keeping in mind when looking at tiny homes?
So when you're looking at tiny houses, I would say that okay. So first is we're open and receptive to people calling us. Whether they use us or they decide not to, or they go a completely different route. We have no problem having a conversation. And trying to help people along the way, because we're here for the industry as a whole, not just for Noah itself. Um, but as far as what they would look for, I would say when you when you are in your house, um, and you have that comfort level in your house, um, do you get that comfort level in a tiny house? So, like for example, you can walk into a house and like say an old house, and you as soon as you walk in, like in a winter day or a hot day, you can feel the temperature in the house. You can feel if it's warm, if it's cold, if it's damp, if there's a constant breeze coming through. The same goes for a tiny house. And you can tell a lot by walking into the house. Try not to glom onto the shiny and bright and pretty stuff. Um, you know, see if the builder has photos of the actual build, under construction, and then see if they'll give you a copy of those photos or email them to you or whatever. Bounce them off a couple people. Find somebody that does framing and say, hey, take a look at this. What do you think? Because if you have a strong foundation framing in this case, um, that's the first start to a good build.
I really like that. I like that you're suggesting that people, get photos of the build, and then like kind of like it's not necessarily like getting a second opinion, but it's just making sure that someone else that's like knowledgeable of what it should look like sees it before you sign. Because I think what's
Yeah,
happening right now is exactly what you're saying. Like people are really looking at just what it looks like from a design perspective. But
yeah,
like design is not the same as quality in terms of what's behind, the backsplash or the what's underneath
right.
the countertops, or like that sort of thing. Like all those things you don't see. So I think that that is a really great piece of advice, to just ask to see if they have the photos, and if they don't have photos, maybe that's enough of an indication to maybe consider not going that route.
Yeah, or asking more questions. If they have, if they're building more than one unit at a
Hmm.
time, can you look at a unit being built, under construction, or can they send you photos of that one, even if it isn't yours? Because if they built one and they're building another, they're going to be very, very similar, on how they build. Maybe not the actual layout and all of that, but how they build is essentially the same for
Hmm.
overall.
Yeah. No, I think that's really good advice. And I think it is, I think it is going to take a little bit of time, because I do feel like what the average consumer wants now, the types of questions they're asking, are pushing builders and people in the industry. But I think that trust does need to be built as the industry continues to change and shift. So I think it's important for people not to be like offended if, someone's asking you like tons of questions. It's just that
Yeah.
they want to make sure that they're getting something that's really high quality. It's not because they're necessarily like questioning your ability to build the home.
Right. Yeah. Yeah,
That makes sense.
exactly. I couldn't agree more on that. Yeah, it's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
Oops.
Awesome.
So
Well,
yeah,
thank you, Rich. I appreciate you taking the time to chat with us. I think that there's a lot of mystery around different aspects of tiny homes, and I think you taking the time to chat with us today about NOAA and certification, the weather side of things, like helps remove a little bit of that mystery, which can only help people feel better as they make these very very expensive purchases now, as the prices keep going up. But yeah, thank you for taking the time to chat with me. And there'll be links to everything you're doing in the videos. People can reach out and they can ask questions, and hopefully continue to just gain more knowledge in their tiny journey.
Okay. No, I appreciate it. And I appreciate you doing what you do on your end because it's a huge, huge help. And, to have live information that's, reliable, it's invaluable. So kudos to yourself and, it's keep it going.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I will.
All right.
All right.
Take
Thank you, Rich.
care.
You too. All right, that was my conversation with Rich. I appreciate Rich taking the time to walk us through what is NOAA, what is their certification process, why does certification matter, what are the risks you're taking when you're buying a tiny home that is not certified, and one of the most important topics of all for those of you who have been watching the channel and dropping comments about the weather is what do you do in terms of making sure your tiny house is safe during a storm. So Rich gives really good advice, like practical things that you can do, but also the peace of mind that you get when your tiny house is certified, particularly through NOAA. So make sure you check out the link in the description, reach out, ask questions so that you can learn more about the process and feel more comfortable as you go and look at different tiny houses. Make sure you ask questions. I can't stress that enough. It's so important that you ask questions of your builder. Get those photos. Check other sources to make sure that the structure of the tiny house is sound before you sign on the dotted line. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe, and thank you guys so much for watching. If you're interested in learning more about tiny homes and safety and things behind the scenes, you can check out these videos I did with Sailor where he walks us through different aspects of the certification. And don't forget to think tiny. I'll see you guys in the next one.